The journey of life is one where we go through tough times and where we go through good times as well. And how nice it is when people come and you're going through a tough time and they support you in those tough times. It is also important that when other people are celebrating, we celebrate with them. Now, that's the essence of Household of Love. We desire to bind the brokenhearted and celebrate with people who are celebrating. Candid Talk is that platform that has been availed for people to candidly talk about the things they are going through in life, the joys they find in life. And it is a platform that we would want to use to bind the brokenhearted and to celebrate with the ones that are celebrating. It is a production of the Household of Love. Welcome to Candid Talk.
Dr. Esther Nkrumah has in the recent past been a lecturer at St. Paul's University, Limuru, and currently works at NIST International Leadership University, ILU. She is the program leader for the Bachelor of Leadership and Management and the Diploma program in the School of Leadership and Governance. She holds a PhD in Organization Development and Transformation, a master's degree in Counseling Studies, a master's degree in Human Resource Management, and a bachelor's degree in Accounting. Esther is married to Reverend Canon Dr. Emmanuel Kwasi Amuafo, who serves in the Anglican Church of Kenya and is a faculty member in the Master's and PhD program of Global University. Reverend Patrick Obel is a counseling psychologist at USIU Africa. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree in Bible and Theology from Park University, a master's degree in counseling psychology from Daystar University, and currently pursuing his PhD at Kabarak University. He's also a married man, married to one Dorcas Obel, and a father to 4 daughters. Mrs. Julia Ombasyi. She is married to Clayton Ombasyi, and together they have 3 lovely children. She is the founder of the Household of Love Center. She's the reason why we are here. Thank you for having us. And she possesses diverse experience in working with women, children, and young people across all age groups from varied cultural, educational, religious, and socioeconomic backgrounds. So now that we know who is on the panel today, I'll go straight to Mrs. Julia, who will tell us more about the topic of the day.
Okay, our topic today is loss. I don't know whether you've ever lost something, One time I had a beautiful phone that I'd just bought and it got lost and I felt the loss. And so there are several types of losses. There's the loss of where somebody loses a person through death. There's loss of relationships. There's loss of position. And there's various losses. And every time we lose something, we actually grieve, And there are emotions that come with these losses. You will feel guilty and ashamed. And sometimes that guilt and shame comes from maybe the type of loss of maybe where you've lost a job and you're thinking, is it my performance? It could be to do with losing a marriage and you feel, oh, was I not a good husband or was I not a good wife? And so you feel the shame, you feel the guilt, you feel like you contributed to it. But there's also the feeling that the emotions that you have of hopelessness and sadness, so much sadness, And that sometimes comes in the when we lose people through death. You are so hopeless. You can't bring that person back to life. And you are so sad you can't even express the sadness that you have, And we also have fear. We get scared. You're fearful, when you've lost somebody. Sometimes it could even just be, I'll sleep alone in the room, if it was your spouse. And sometimes the fear is, what are people saying about me? Sometimes the fear is, do I anymore have friends? But there's that fear that you feel, And then there's also anger. You feel so angry. Sometimes you're angry with people who let you down, angry with people who are not were not there to stand with you. And that occasionally comes maybe when somebody has jilted you, you know, you are just going to get married and they walked away on you, you know. And you also have that feeling of betrayal. You've been betrayed, you know. Here you are, you had this spouse, and then all of a sudden they're in the arms of somebody else, and you are lonely. And the heart is, while you're lonely, they're comforted in somebody else's hands, you know, and it gets so sad. So there are those different emotions, and perhaps I will allow my brother Patrick to talk about the stages of loss. But those emotions come, and it will be nice to understand that it's okay to have those emotions. Thank you.
Now, actually there are various models that explain how people experience the loss or how they grieve. And the other terms maybe that I used sometimes talk about bereavement, people talk about mourning, people talk about grief. And we use this so interchangeably. Maybe just to clarify, let me start by saying grief is actually the response that one has the moment that they have had a loss. Now that response they're having is actually what we call grief, because it's mixed with issues which are maybe spiritual, there could be emotional, there could be social issues. So it's a whole collection of things that one goes through when they are grieving. And then you talk about mourning is now actually the moment they're expressing that grief. Okay, and then that is now what we can observe. They're actually mourning because you can see exactly what is happening. Now bereavement is the outcome of somebody has gone through loss, and so what it is that they're experiencing is what we call bereavement. So, but we use these terms interchangeably many times, but maybe that helps to clarify. So grief is actually the response, and that is what I'll be talking about here. And so when we have the different models that people give about how people go through this, some talk about a dual model where there is one dealing with the pain and then the other one dealing with the restoration, now from the pain. And then there are lots of stuff that is actually explained in that. But I'm to pick on a 5-stage model which has been developed by Kubler-Ross, which talks about how people go through the stages of grief. Okay, the process of going through that pain and hopefully going through a healing where they can actually be able to carry on with life. Maybe not really normal, but back to where they can function and do the things that they need to do to be able to do life and carry on with the things they need. So first, when somebody hears about death, and the losses are a variety, like Julia said, it could be a loss of a property, it could be a loss of health, maybe somebody is diagnosed with a terminal illness, and so maybe they even lose a limb or something. So all those are losses that people will actually grieve. But the ultimate loss normally is death. When you've lost a loved one and somebody that is very close to you, it could be a parent, it could be a child, it could be a spouse, it could be a sibling, it could be a friend, I mean whoever it is, but somebody really very, very close. So what happens in all this process of grieving, the first thing when the news comes and hits you, people are in shock.
Yes.
Actually, they're in denial. You know, you are shocked. It's like, I mean, this can't be happening. Tell me it is not true. Yeah? Tell me, you're just, exactly. Am I really the one hearing this? Now, it is a response because it is death that has happened. Somebody has just told you so-and-so is no more. And so people go through that moment of shock. Now, actually, it's a response to help them cope with that moment. Okay? Because they wouldn't just receive that information, oh, okay, finally, unless they're expecting it. But you see, many times nobody expects death. And so when it happens, people are in shock and they're in denial. Following that is anger. People get so angry. And anger can be directed to many, many different objects or many, many different directions. Now, somebody may be angry at themselves. Now, take a case where somebody dies and they are far away, and maybe you had planned to visit them. And now you get angry. I mean, I should have visited them. How come I was not sensitive enough to do that? So people direct anger at themselves. Or maybe somebody falls sick and you're rushing them to hospital, and just before you arrive at the hospital, they're actually pronounced dead. And so one may get angry at themselves for not acting fast enough to be able to help the person who has died. So the anger could be directed at self because of maybe failure to do certain things, or a perception that one failed to do things they should have done. Okay? And so one gets very angry at themselves. Others could be angry Maybe if it's somebody who's died in hospital, maybe they could be angry at the doctors, you know, they were negligent, they didn't work enough, or maybe if it's a person who was taken to a particular hospital, which someone may perceive was more of substandard, they get angry at, why did you pick on that hospital, not the other hospital? So anger could be directed at those who took this person to hospital. So anger can be directed to many directions. And for the religious, they may actually direct this to God. Where were you? How could you allow this to happen? And maybe if people had prayed, you know, now that's even worse. They've been praying and, you know, maybe waiting on God, and the person still dies. So people can get angry at God. So that is just a stage. They're just dealing with the loss because they're processing this loss. One, they are in shock, but then they move to a place of anger, and they're really angry at so many things or so many people, including themselves or even God. After that, then they move to the next stage, which you call a Baguette stage. Now, the Baguette stage, I call it a place of negotiation. This has happened, but it could have happened differently. So somebody is engaging in that conversation. It's like, okay, if it's somebody who has lost maybe a child, it's like, well, but you know, did they need to die now? Yeah, it's like maybe they should have died, but not now. Yeah, so somebody is having that conversation. It's a bargain. That's what you're calling it, a bargain. They're negotiating. It's like, okay, maybe they should have died, but not in this manner. Did they have to die when they are very far away from us? You know, maybe they should have come back home. You know, maybe they should have been near us. So when they are dying, you know, at least we could have been there. Or maybe this could have happened, or that could have happened. So it's a more of a conversation.
But you know, you make me think of bargain and marriage. Where you'll probably go to the spouse and say, you can even have that other wife. Let's just go on with this marriage. So you're bargaining, let's just go on.
Exactly. You know, that's a loss. You know, you're talking about a loss of a marriage. So you're feeling like, okay, can we just work it out in some ways? You know? Or did that woman need to come now? You know, those kind of things. So it's a bargain situation that one is engaged in. Or even if it's a phone, like she talked about a phone, you know, you should have actually enjoyed using it for a while.
I should have called someone first.
Yes, you know, just losing it like that, or even a property. And that so many people even have lost money because maybe they were duped in land they needed to buy or something, and you're feeling like at least you would have built in and lived there for some time. Then somebody says, oh, okay, you don't need to be here. They'll have enjoyed being there. You know, that's a bargain thing that one is actually really wrestling with. What is happening is they are processing their pain. And as they are processing their pain, they have reached this place of trying to negotiate it. It's like they're getting to accept that this thing has actually happened, but now they're working through it. Then they move to a place called depression. Now, that is a point of helplessness. Where somebody feels this thing is not changing. If it's a death, I mean, they have died. Yeah, it's not coming back. It's not changing. Nothing is improving here. They get to a place of helplessness because they realize they can't change it themselves. There is nothing they can do to make things any different. And so they get into a dark place. Okay, it's a place where people actually, in fact, for those who may go through that experience, when you visit them, they're not even talking to anyone. Or you're told, no, they're in the bedroom. It's like they don't know how to see anybody. They're so withdrawn because they're in a dark place. They are depressed. Basically, they're depressed. They're in a place where they just don't know what to do and how to handle this. They don't have the right words to say. They don't know what words they should be saying. So even when you are visiting and you're asking questions, so I mean, what should they be answering? They really don't know what to say. Maybe they've answered a few questions in the past when they were angry, they were going through all this ranting process. But now they're in this place of realizing, you know what? So and so is gone. I can't change it. I can't do anything about it. You know, I'm just here. And you realize how helpless you are. And that is where now we graduate to a place of acceptance. Okay? You know, I've talked about denial, which is a place of shock. Then I've talked about anger. Then I've talked about bargain. Then I've talked about depression. Moving to acceptance. Now, acceptance is a place where somebody hopefully is actually resolving the process. They are getting to a place of, some people would call moving on, which in my discussion with people who have lost loved ones, I wonder what moving on means. But maybe a place of healing. They're a place of resolving what they have. And the interesting thing about grief is that people spontaneously resolve it. Over time, people spontaneously resolve it, and they're able to carry on with life as they carry on and do things, because it's such a natural thing that we all go through. it is something just like us dying ourselves. It's something that someday will happen, and so people around us dying is a natural thing that have maybe the stamina to bear it. Others may not have this. So again, our personalities may affect how that goes. Now, the other bit that I think I should mention here, which is important, is our cultural socialization. How we have been socialized may also impact on how we will actually go through the grief, because it's a process that you're doing in a context. You know, you're not grieving in the air somewhere. You're grieving in a context where there are other people. You are living in a community, and the things that we expect to act in a particular manner or to behave in a particular manner. So all these are things that we are experiencing that may determine how long we go through our experience. Some people, maybe in a year or two, they'll have resolved this. Others, maybe it will take longer than that. And then the other thing that maybe I should also mention is it is not a linear process. You know, I've mentioned it, denial, anger, again, then you go to depression and then acceptance. So it's like you're just climbing stairs. After you're at the last stair, then you jump over. No, that is not really what happens in real life. It's a cyclic thing. Sometimes you may find yourself at Baguette, and in a moment you're again in anger, and so one actually goes back and forth. But in as much as it's a back and forth, one actually is resolving the issue. They are processing that issue, and ultimately they're actually able to get them out. And you know, whoever is listening to me, maybe you're thinking, wow, so what stage am I in if you are grieving? Or maybe somebody that I know, what stage could they be in? You know, maybe this is the stage that they're in. And so it is a cyclic thing. They may go up, go down, they go back. You know, so it's a back and forth situation. And maybe we'll listen to an experience from our colleague, and we may be responding to a few other issues much later about some of these issues of stages.
Well, my story begins with a young woman in love. Francis Nkrumah was my first love, my first boyfriend, and it was East meets West. You know, he was from Ghana, I was from Kenya, and it was very interesting how we met. But cut the long story short, I saw him. He was ministering at a place, and there was this nudge, the Holy Spirit, that's your husband. And even though it took 7 years to get married to him because of opposition and just the whole circumstance in our cultures, we got married. And we were blessed with 2 beautiful children. Kwame was 5.5, and his sister Mkawasi was 2. We had just moved back to Kenya from the US, and we were working with an organization called Emerging Young Leaders, and it was mentoring young people and cultivating leadership in these young people. And so we were back home. It was wonderful. It was providential that we were in Kenya. The office could have been anywhere else because this was an American organization. And we had just come, and because of the conflict within which the East meets West, it was a chance for us to resolve that. And so, you know, we came back with the family, and for the first time, my mother allowed us to visit home, and she fell in love with my husband. After almost 7 years of marriage, she had had much difficulty in accepting. But when she met him, she fell in love with him. And forever she blamed herself for not accepting him earlier, you know. So that was in 1998 that we came back from the US. And in 1999, we went home. And my husband was introduced to the family, and she just loved him. She would call and say, "Where's my son now? Is he flying? Where is he going now?" You know, because he traveled a lot. And little did we know that after going home in January of '99 to meet with my mom, and she welcomed us home, and it was a wonderful reception, that 1 year later, he would travel to Ghana for a function, And on his way back on Kenya Airways flight, the flight just left Abidjan, and 3 minutes later it crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. And he was on board together with a lot of Christian leaders. I think about 70 other Christian leaders were on that flight. And when I got the phone call, his friend who had seen him off to the airport called, and he just quickly said, I think he'd been debating on how to break the news to me. And so it was about 6 o'clock here, so they had been waiting because the flight was at midnight. So, and I was thinking, you know, in the morning he'd be arriving. Yeah. So then I get this phone call at 6 o'clock, and up until today I don't like morning phone calls. And he says there has been a plane crash, but there have been some survivors, and I don't even remember the rest of the conversation. And then he hung up. And so I was like, oh my God, oh my God. So I went and I turned on BBC. And they were actually talking about this plane crash. And I thought, oh my, I mean, it was such a shock. I didn't even know how to process it. I'm pacing up and down the stairs. I don't know what to do. My children are asleep. And so I finally call a friend, and I said, this is the phone call that I got. I don't know. They say they are survivors. And within a short time, people began to arrive in my house. And I thought, no, he can't. That was not the plan. Yeah. No, he can't go like that. Yeah. We've only been married just about 7 years. And actually, it was 7 years because we had just celebrated our 7th anniversary, and at church he had planned this with the pastor and asked me, will you marry me again? And he had given me a ring. Actually, this is the ring he gave me, which had 7 stones. And he said in front of everybody, in the Bible, 7 signifies completion. So however many years God wants to give us, we are starting afresh, you know. And he gave me the ring, and it was beautiful. I think Julie was there, and it was an exciting time. And then soon thereafter, this happens. And I really could not process it. I just could not. And the day went on, and people began to come into the house. It was on CNN, the television was on throughout the day. Then in the evening, people are leaving work, they began to come, and I'm thinking, why are they coming to my house? I mean, really, because this is not happening, you know. But as the time wore on, it became very clear that he was on that flight. And then as Kenya Airways began to call us to share with us the manifesto, who was on and who actually made it onto the flight, we learned that he made it. He probably got the last seat because this was a flight that was packed because of the Hamilton. It couldn't land in Lagos, and so it went to Abidjan while still full. So they took only a very, very few people, and he was one of those who fought to get in onto the flight. And because he said, no, I have to go home. He had spoken to us, spoken to the children, said how much he loved us, and then he got on the flight. And but all of this time, I could not. It wasn't real. It was surreal. It was like a nightmare. I could hear people talking, but I was not there. I don't know if you understand. Like, I'm present, but I'm not present, because this is too much. We've just come home. It is wonderful. How could it end like this? How then, what you were talking about, just trying to process, could this be true? No, it can't be true. No, and then the bargaining and all of that. Well, as the story unfolded, you know, there were a few survivors. There was a Frenchman who swam, you know, and the Atlantic is very cold. The waters are choppy, and it was very. Those who didn't die on the flight died because of the water, but there were some people who were able to swim to the shore. I think there was a Frenchman who did that, and then there were a few other people who were rescued. The response was not too quick. There were hours before they got to the wreckage, and many of the people just died in their seatbelts and all of that. So then we had to fly from here to Abidjan to identify the bodies. And really it was like moving in a daze, like you're a robot basically, because it hasn't hit home yet. It doesn't make sense. And you know, in your mind you're thinking, this is not happening, this is not true. And as we were sitting in this very lavish intercontinental hotel, you could hear people losing their minds. I mean, because everybody gathered there because they had their loved ones on that flight. And just sitting and watching people and seeing the emotions, it was surreal. You know, we had even some of the Kenya Airways employees also having breakdowns because they couldn't handle the stress. So we were there, and then in the morning we are transported to the morgue. As they pull out the bodies to bring them to the morgue, then you go and see if this is your loved one, you identify. And it was one of those days when we were sitting on a bench, and I thought, no, this is not happening, because how could God allow this to happen? I mean, is this how you treat your people? And I began the anger with God. I said, no. Here we are serving you, we are seeing fruit, we are seeing the ministry is flourishing, and then you stab it's like you're stabbed in the, as you're going on serving the Lord, he stabs you for me it was like, are you that kind of a God? Are you a sadist? You know, so there was a lot of conversation in the mind. You watch the way people are behaving, and the thing that struck me is, after being there, we were there for about a week, but after being there for a few days, they no longer were bringing bodies that you could really identify, because they were beginning to decompose, and so they would bring them in bags. And I said, Lord, this is not how the story is supposed to end. Like black garbage bags, they bring them in, and the way as soon as they bring them out of the water, they do this post-mortem, and you can hear it. You can hear the axes. And I thought, no, this cannot be the end. He must have survived. He can't. I actually even went to some of the hospitals where they had survivors to look at, could it be him, you know. And just seeing how you can never be prepared for death. Nothing can really prepare you for the departure of your loved one, regardless of how they go. But you know, this was extremely painful to watch, and you know, identifying bodies and all of that, and even the smell. It's almost like it stays with you. You know, and you've never been prepared for that, you know. So to see the pain, but even the smell that lingers on, that in fact for a long time, even I couldn't eat meat. You know, it's just that process of something dead. You know. Yeah. Then we came back home after a week. His body was not found, and so I mean, with all the efforts to bring out the bodies, they said, now at this point we can only take out remains. It's not something you can identify, and eventually, of course, whatever remains they could find, they had to do like a mass grave, because you couldn't really identify. And I remember them asking for if you have any hair or nail clippings or anything that you can find that belongs to your loved ones. You send it to Abidjan, and then they would do a DNA, but that forensic to match. And that was never really done, even though I went under the bed and everywhere where I knew I could find clippings, because I wanted to have some type of closure, yes. But that never happened. And eventually, with the support of CITAM, which we were members of, it was NPC in those days, we were members of NPC, and I just remember the return to Nairobi, and there was just a whole lot of us coming. It was a Kenya Airways flight. Now you can imagine taking a Kenya Airways flight again. And arriving and seeing just a line of people who were waiting for us. I think, if I'm not wrong, the Pastor Dennis White, with all the leaders, you know, it was something that I'll forever cherish. Just to see all these widows, widowers, you know, people who lost their children and that kind of thing. It was just reliving it. It was something else. So we arrived to a warm welcome and a support. But then it began now the journey of learning how to accept this reality.